Eleanor Hayes was 68, small enough that most people barely noticed her moving through the military clinic each morning. She wore gray sneakers, a faded blue cardigan, and a volunteer badge that flipped backward whenever she pushed her supply cart down the hall. To the young medics at Fort Brennan, she was just Mrs. Hayes, the woman who folded towels, restocked gloves, and somehow knew when the coffee pot was empty. None of them knew why she paused outside the simulation room whenever the alarm started. No one noticed how her eyes moved from the patient's airway to the medic's hands, then to the clock. And no one guessed that the slight tremor in her fingers had not come from age alone. 43 years earlier, those hands had worked under helicopter blades, gunfire, smoke, and darkness. But Eleanor never spoke about that. She simply watched. Lately, she had been watching Private Daniel Carter fall apart. Daniel was 22, disciplined, and near the top of his class on every written exam. He knew every protocol and could name every step in a trauma assessment. But the moment the room got loud, something inside him shut down. During one drill, a mannequin screamed through hidden speakers while red fluid poured from its leg. Daniel stared at it for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds did not sound like much. In combat medicine, 3 seconds could be everything. "Airway first," Captain Miller shouted. Daniel grabbed the wrong kit. "Carter, focus." He dropped a clamp. The alarm kept screaming. The countdown kept moving. By the time he applied the tourniquet, the exercise was over. Captain Miller stopped the clock. "Patient lost." Daniel looked down at his gloves, stained with fake blood. He had failed the same scenario twice that week. The final field evaluation was in 2 days. Anyone who failed would be removed from the rapid response team. Daniel had worked 18 months for that assignment. Now he was one bad morning away from losing it. The others left for lunch, speaking softly as they passed him. No one mocked him. Somehow, that felt worse. They had stopped expecting him to succeed. Daniel reset the mannequin and started again by himself. The alarm sounded. He froze. "Stop." The voice came from the doorway. Eleanor stood beside her cart. Daniel wiped his forehead. "This room is restricted during training, ma'am." "I know. You can't be in here." "I know that too." She pushed the cart against the wall, removed her volunteer badge, and walked toward the mannequin. Daniel almost smiled. "Mrs. Hayes, this is a combat trauma simulation." Eleanor looked at the wound, then at the monitor. "I can see that." She pulled on a pair of gloves. "Reset the clock." He stared at her. "Reset it." Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Daniel restarted the exercise. The speakers erupted. Eleanor moved. She checked the airway, assessed the bleeding, and pointed at Daniel without looking up. "Tourniquet, high and tight." He handed it to her. "Not to me. You apply it." Daniel stepped forward. "Look at the bleeding, not the noise," she said. "The room is trying to distract you. The patient is telling you what matters." Her hands moved quickly, never frantically. She stabilized the neck, checked circulation, and gave Daniel one task at a time. "Reassess." He did. Again. "The pulse is weaker. So act on that." Within 90 seconds, the airway was secure, the bleeding was controlled, and the mannequin was ready for evacuation. Eleanor stopped the clock. She had completed the scenario faster than Captain Miller's best team. Daniel stared at her. "How did you do that?" Eleanor removed her gloves. "I didn't try to solve the whole room," she said. "I solved the next problem." Then she picked up her badge and returned to her cart. Daniel followed her into the hall. "Mrs. Hayes, wait, can you teach me?" She stopped. "I can show you," she said, "but only if you're willing to be uncomfortable." "I am. Tomorrow, 5:30. The clinic doesn't open until 6. I know. The next morning, Eleanor was already waiting. She did not begin with bandages or equipment. She made Daniel stand in the dark simulation room while the alarm played. Every time his breathing sped up, she made him start over. Your hands follow your breath, she told him. Lose control of one, and you lose control of both. She taught him to identify one threat at a time. Airway, bleeding, breathing, circulation. Act on the first problem before worrying about the fifth. When Daniel made a mistake, she did not yell. She asked what he had seen, what he had missed, and what he would do differently. They trained again that afternoon. The next morning, 3 other medics showed up early. Eleanor almost sent them away, but Daniel said they need it too. So she trained all 4. Word spread quickly about the quiet volunteer who could run a trauma room better than most instructors. Specialist Owens became curious and searched her name in an old service database. He found a photograph. A younger Eleanor stood beside a medical evacuation helicopter in desert fatigues, her face streaked with dirt and her sleeve torn. Under the photograph were the words, First Lieutenant Eleanor Hayes, Army Nurse Corps. Owens kept digging. He found 2 citations for valor and a report about a field hospital hit during an evacuation. 12 wounded soldiers had been trapped inside. Eleanor went back 3 times after being ordered to leave. 11 survived. The 12th was her closest friend. The final evaluation began at 6 the next morning. Smoke filled the training area. Explosions sounded through overhead speakers. 6 simulated casualties lay across the floor. Daniel entered with his team. For 20 seconds, he was steady. Then one mannequin began coughing blood. Daniel stopped. The noise rushed back into his head. The clock, the shouting, the fear that everyone was waiting for him to fail. Behind the observation glass, Eleanor raised one hand and tapped 2 fingers against her wrist. Breathe. Daniel inhaled, then exhaled. He looked at the casualty, not the room. Airway team, with me, he said. His voice was quiet at first, then stronger. Owens, control that bleeding. Lewis, mark the walking wounded. I need an evacuation order in 30 seconds. The team moved. Daniel moved with them. One problem, then the next. He placed a chest seal, corrected a bad tourniquet, and changed priorities when one patient's condition worsened. At 7 minutes, Captain Miller introduced a surprise complication. Daniel adapted. At 9 minutes, the last casualty was stable. The clock stopped. Captain Miller checked the board. All 6 patients had survived. Daniel turned toward the glass. Eleanor was gone. He found her near the service entrance, loading clean linens onto her cart. I passed, he said. I heard. You knew I could do it. Eleanor folded a towel. No, I knew you could learn to do it. That's different. Boots sounded behind them. Captain Miller approached with Owens and the base commander. Lieutenant Hayes, the captain said. Eleanor's hands stopped. Daniel looked at her. Captain Miller held her service record. We verified everything. The field hospitals, the evacuation missions, the citations. That was a long time ago. The commander wants to recognize you at formation tomorrow. No. The answer came so quickly that everyone went silent. We'd also like you to return as a civilian instructor, Captain Miller continued. This unit could use you. Eleanor looked through the clinic window at the young medics resetting the simulation room. No, she said again. Daniel stepped closer. Why not? For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked at him. Because this was never about proving what I can still do. The tremor had returned to her hands. It was about making sure you knew what you could do. Eleanor picked up her cart. Daniel moved in front of it. Then come back tomorrow, not for the ceremony, just come back. She gave him a tired smile. You don't need me tomorrow. I might. Then teach the person beside you. That's how you keep me here. She pushed the cart down the hallway, her gray sneakers making almost no sound. No applause followed her. No medal was placed in her hands. By the next week, she had returned to her usual routine. Towels, gloves, coffee. Most visitors still assumed she was only a volunteer. But the medics knew better. Daniel stayed with the rapid response team. Months later, he became the medic younger soldiers asked for when a drill went wrong. He never yelled. When someone froze, he lowered his voice. Look at the patient, not the noise. When someone tried to solve everything at once, he asked, "What is the next problem?" And when fear took control of their hands, he tapped 2 fingers against his wrist. Breathe. Years later, Daniel would save lives in places far louder and more dangerous than that simulation room. Commanders would praise his calm under pressure. But Daniel knew the truth. Calm was not something he had been born with. It had been given to him by a woman everyone else had learned not to see. Eleanor never accepted the ceremony. She never displayed her citations in the clinic. She never told the young medics how many people she had carried out of burning tents, or how many nights she had spent thinking about the one person she could not save. She simply kept showing up, because she understood something most people learn too late. The highest form of courage is not always running toward danger. Sometimes it is returning to the place that broke you, standing beside someone who is afraid, and teaching them how not to break, then stepping away before anyone thinks to applaud.